This is season 6, episode 23, number 241 of the Decoded podcast. Good morning, Chris.
Good morning, Roller Chidiac.
I like that. Good on-ramp today, talking about a couple of things. It's nice to have that little bit of time to just chit-chat before we hit broadcast, in my opinion.
Yep.
You agree?
Agreed. Yep. Good flow, good combo, good kind of just like get. It's like what do they call that? You're not going to do static warm-ups. You're going to do active warm-ups. So it's not like we it's not like we off mic go me, my, mo. Like we're not warming up the vocal chops. We're warming up the conversation chops. So, if you're going to be a sprinter, do some light sprints, some bouncy light sprints. You're going to be, a weightlifter or an archer. Like you do things that mirror the activity you're about to take on. So that's why I've started to think about our on-ramp. We're just kind of doing conversation to do conversation.
I get it. I like it too. I want to roll into... So I want to talk about my job a little bit, but not the actual work. Something that I wanted to do when I started this job. So I've been in the job now, like a year and a half. And when I found out that I got this job last year, I started a YouTube channel because I wanted to have a place where I could record and publish some of my thinking, some of my experiences. And I never did anything with it. And I've been thinking about it lately. I've been thinking about why I didn't, why I haven't, what's stopping me, why it might be stopping me. Going through all of that, about, I don't know, 3-4 weeks ago, I actually recorded a day in the life of my work. And I already, the title for the video was going to be called It's Thursday. And then I had this idea that every Thursday I would kind of do a little thing. I would capture my work. So on my phone right now, I have footage of a Thursday, and then I put it in my video editor and then walked away from it. So why am I sharing this? Because I'm hoping that maybe talking a little bit about it out loud helps me get to the next step of editing some video and then publishing it and then seeing what happens. Because I think when this comes to an end, I may regret that I never documented any of it. Because
This
like
the position potentially,
my day-to-day work as a teacher,
as it is right now,
as it is, yeah, like just because it's so different than the traditional perspective experience of like a classroom teacher.
Yeah, gotcha.
I just wanted to get that out there. So now it's out there. We'll see what happens next. But it's kind of cool. It's kind of not cool when I go to the site and I look at because it's on my phone. So sometimes when I'm going between my YouTube accounts, for some reason it defaults to that one and it's just empty, like ghost town.
Yeah.
Do you have any words of wisdom for me?
What I love about this question, and what feels very deja vu about this question, is that you could actually kind of do snapshots back through your professional life, starting with, so the next one back might be, why start podcasting? And then your question before that would be, why start blogging? And then your question before that could be, why present to staff? Right? Like why? And across the whole thing is this idea of sharing, right? It's this idea of sharing experiences, letting your experiences kind of go out into the universe, and then you know, looking at your relationship to those experiences through other people's eyes. Like that's always been my sort of fundamental, kind of like one of my baseline uh, code in why I do this with you, why I originally got into podcasting. Telling the original question I had is like, how is this thing happening? I think I will never forget this because it's such a good thing to remember. Not only the moment, but the specific type of curiosity was me sitting in that staff meeting, knowing full well that the particular topic we were talking about would be discussed at other schools. And I wanted to know how other schools were dealing with it. So I sent emails. And it was soon after that that I discovered Twitter and say, okay, I don't have to stop just here. I don't just have to, email my colleague over at Aurora High. I can actually go citywide, Ontario-wide, Canada-wide, North America-wide, European. I can go, like, I can cross the ocean and actually post a question about how different people were learning things. And I think there's a better for worse on that, because I do think that when you go too far out to the fringe, the stuff is pretty much useless. Like, it's interesting, but it doesn't specifically, the steps it takes to go find something really cool, often you have to acknowledge the number of steps that it took you there. So, listening to my friend at Aurora, connecting to other educators in Ontario, they're not sequential, as in, like, if I take something about, let's just take a student dress code. If I saw a topic of student dress code being discussed, I can drop into a bunch of different conversations, but then it's up to me to figure out what are the steps to make that a cohesive, actionable kind of idea at my school. So I think at some point you go so far from your center. For me, sometimes it just became confusing, because then I had to do good confusion, because sometimes it made me realize, whoa, the way we're even talking about this is not the way we should be talking about this. But that still didn't change the fact that if that's not a good way to be talking about it, then you have to level up everybody with you. So it's like, whatever you find, how do you make it usable? How do you make it like the common language, so that the people around you that are willing to take chance and make change, they can move with you? So once in a while, that is what happened. For me to be having a conversation about dress code on Twitter back in the day with someone living in Sweden, like, that was one of my experiences. We're like chatting back and forth. There is similarities, but there's so many other hurdles to jump that you would still have to figure out to even enter into that type of conversation back in my own school board, that you just kind of park that, in the Post-it note parking lot and say, this is just a reminder, but I have to start somewhere else. Your flow, your flow, if this is about you, I think that exploring new ways to communicate your ideas is a part of this same progression of talking to your staff in your little community, then starting to use social media, expanding your community, then diversifying your toolkit in order to communicate with diverse communities within the community. So your progression to make video about your day, in some ways, is like coming home to a very simple idea. Like, because it is it's you-centered, right? You get to be your own kind of star of the day. But I think you need to kind of come through that long path in order to get the right tools to be able to clearly show what your day's about. Because I think to myself, if you were to make a video about your day back when you were deep with Google and doing the Google ambassador, no, I'm not saying that right. What's it? The Google
Certified innovator.
The innovator. I'm imagining that a video about your day back when you're an innovator would be far tighter and clearer to make than it is now. And this has to do with your expansive lens. So you now understanding your day. I love this idea of doing the video, because you're in some ways it's gonna be a forced perspective, because you're not going to give all access to or maybe you will, I don't know. You can't give all access to everything that goes down. So the viewer will have to kind of accept the truth of what or not, but really you're forcing the truth on your version of the truth, that sort of like 10 minutes of truth, whatever it is. But I think it's a natural progression to try and get to something true. Whenever you've done, yeah, and you did another video back in the day, you sitting in your classroom. I forget the topic. Was it identity, about being seen? I forget what it was. And you were sitting in your classroom and you were speaking a truth. I feel like those types of projects are kind of on brand right now in general with YouTube spaces, like just that kind of like, here's a honest account of what I'm kind of going through. But the fact that you're not monetizing, I think forces you, or no, releases you, I'll say it that way, from some of those, the way text has to come up on the screen, or, flipping from color to black and white, or have the oblique angle of the camera, these things that are entirely kind of trendy right now in order to put out these videos, which I know you're aware of because I've seen you do them in different pieces, right? Jump clips, color overlays, like all these other kind of things that are attention catching. What I love about the idea of you writing and creating these videos moving forward is because I don't get the sense that you're looking to catch eyes. It's a natural progression of your reflective practice. And the fact that you haven't jumped on it yet, I'm fine with that, because you could in a minute go back to a story because your job is in its like 2.0 version. You could go back quite easily to a 1.0 because you've mentioned some of those memories so clearly. So on one hand, all that data is still there if you access it, right? Like all your unwritten scripts are there for you. But I also really like the idea of, if the YouTube is meant to be in the moment, as in you want it to be artifactual at the end of the day, like, you know what I mean? Like you want to try and post something up once a week, like a tighter time frame. I entirely understand why it might have taken you 2 years to figure out how videoing your job could work, because I feel like only now the set pieces are kind of there, right? So now you can say, I know I'm kind of going to be doing this way on a Tuesday. I know I'm going to kind of be doing something like this on a Friday. Okay, I know that our full team meetings happen here. So now what you're able to do, we talked about this on the on-ramp. You now see the thing coming towards you. You're able to sort of look at it right, it's there in front of you, and you can kind of say, okay, I know where it's going to go if I do it. So this idea of recording maybe Wednesdays, because that's the day where you get to have a conversation with FNCS. I never get that thing, but be able to, you're connecting with family and child services. And it's not that you want to put them on tape, but you know that that's always a great bit of truth to share about your job. So now you see it coming, you're able to map out what you want to do while you're there. And you have a pretty clear idea that when you hit publish, who's going to be connected with that. So it's a funny thing. Like, I think this is the weird opposite side of risk, which is strategy, right? I'm making up this binary. Risk is where you started, because it was like, let's do a podcast. Let's do a video with Clough. Let's do this. I'm going to start blogging. I'm going to start tracking my leadership. I understand their strategy there too, but there was, I think, a higher level of understanding risk. And I'm wondering if you've been doing this long enough now, you now understand risk. So it can't be the primary factor anymore for me. And I love that you've kind of been stumped on this, because it does come back to, me wondering, how do you see the purpose, I guess, of doing these videos? I know that this is your space for creativity. I get that. But I'm avoiding the cynic, the Simon Sinek sort of like elephant in the room. But the why behind going to the videos, kind of speaks to the purpose. Like, because you've been doing everything else. You could still represent your day in different forms. What's the why behind putting together that video? And are you perceiving it as more risky than anything you're doing right now? Does it feel like a different creative space, but you've already been making these videos? Is it that the job has just become overly dynamic, so it's hard to kind of track what it is, the thing you want to say? Is there still something in this that where you would talk about the job And um, there's an element of career limiting by doing that, as in putting out the content somehow creates a problem for you moving forward. I like all this. That's my 10 minutes of wisdom. And it's brought to you by one more sip from Tim Hortons coffee.
Thank you for everything you said. Um, you said a lot of good things and asked a lot of good questions that, as you're talking, I'm processing. Some questions I can answer easily. Some questions I'm like, yeah, I don't have an answer there. I need to think about that.
Mm.
Can I tell you what kind of set this off that I'm talking about it today?
The
That's
chat of it, what started the need to talk about it?
yeah,
Okay.
it is the book we're reading for the men's book club, The Tools by
Connect the
Phil
dots.
Stutz and Barry Michaels.
Okay.
And I just finished reading the chapter on inner authority, that tool, um, and how that tool is supposed to help people grow their a strong sense of self and use it to make decisions with confidence.
Hmm.
It's like, now, why YouTube? Because it's easier for me to film myself talking about it than it is for me to write it out. Um, it's also in the moment. Like I'm literally like in the car about to go do something or just having done something, and I just turn on the camera and talk about it.
Hmm.
So that way it's easy to capture. So I like that idea. It's also more fun later to watch it than to read it. Um, but anyway, these are some, like, as you were talking, I was thinking these things, but like this idea that I feel like I've accumulated. I feel like there has been some wisdom and knowledge and understanding that's grown within me, not just as an educator, but as a human, because of the work that I'm doing. And anyway, reading that chapter on inner authority and the reasons why people may not believe in themselves or may not share certain things or take risks got me thinking more about this thing. It's like people might see it, and what are people going to think? Um, and I have been in the stuff that I captured on that Thursday. I was very careful, maybe too careful, to not give away um, the school I was at or anything about the student that would help identify them. I do believe, though, that I'm allowed to tell my story. And when I say that, I mean, like, people around me can say whatever they want. If I want to tell my truth, I'm going to tell my truth. I just have to do my best to ensure that it's done in a way that I don't involve others who have not agreed to be part of this journey, but I'm allowed to share my journey because it's my life. It's my journey. Um, but for sure, I am censoring, right? There is a filter, but there's some good stories, man. There's some good case studies that are coming from my work because I'm getting to do something that that people don't get to do, generally speaking, in the world of education. They don't get to do that. Around here in my district, in my board, people aren't doing what I'm doing. So it's novel, it's different. It can be more frustrating than being in a classroom. You really have to consider what's in your control and what's not. You have to look at success completely different than maybe a traditional. It None of it's traditional. None of it's traditional. It's all like, I was talking to the other day to my former uh to a former re-engagement teacher that I worked with last year. And in our brief chat, she brought it to my attention that for the last 2 years, the work I've been doing has been created by me, right? There was a framework, but it was a weak framework, and everything inside that framework has been built by me. So last year it was by three of us. So I was a third of that creation team, and this year it's me and my principal. And it's like I'm literally like, for example, it was said to me, if you had to leave your job right now and you had to explain it to the new person coming in, what would you say to them? And I'm like, that's a great question. How would I explain what I do and how I do it and the protocols? Because some of it, you and I have talked about this year, some of it has grown from actually doing the work. So you do it and you're like, oh, maybe I shouldn't do it that way. Or maybe it make more sense to do it this way. And oh, what would the traditional systems say to me in this situation? Am I protecting myself? Am I doing something that everybody's going to say is risky? Like these are things that these are things that maybe people don't consider until it's in their face. And so for example, I have a student, and due to the parameters of this student's life, many of the tools that I now recognize as tools that I use, I can't use. I'm not permitted to use them to ensure that to ensure everybody's safety. And then it's like 2 years ago, this would have scared the you know what out of me because I'm like, wow, what am I going to do? Today, I'm like, oh, what am I going to do? Like the questions being asked differently. Before, it would have been like, this is a huge problem. I'm in big trouble. Now it's like, wow, what an opportunity to find a new tool to operate with a student where I can't use 90% of my tools. It's like, this
Yeah,
is going to be cool.
the question asked in ignorance is different than the question asked in abundance, right? So now you have a toolkit, and it still can be open ended. What am I going to do? Is in because you're see the here's maybe the shift. I think for the most part, the individuals that you're serving are similar. As in some of the pop problems that are popping up, they're different configurations of the challenges of the languishing student. Back to the original mandate of your position. There's always going to be new kind of stories, life stories, different students. I get the different humans, but you now have kind of like uh, a, you have a portfolio album of experiences that you've now accessed outside of the classroom. So prior, when you started, you had no portfolio, you had no tools. So you don't create the portfolio. That's the accounting of your experiences with the human, right? So the portfolio only grows, like the Pokemon. When you encounter them, when you encounter the individual, then you sort of use the tools that you have to help that individual. Starting out though, the what am I going to do is asking questions to both of those spaces, as in, how am I going to solve problems that I haven't even encountered yet? How am I going to support kids that I haven't even? So you're trying to get this kind of like this guess, this what's it like a strategy to address something you haven't even encountered yet. And then the parallel question is also asking, and what resources and tools are available to me to be able to do this? I think now in your second year of it, you have more of those now. So when you ask, what am I going to do? It's a more informed question, right? It's not like there's still the element of you don't know what you don't know, but I also think like what you need to know about the things in front of you, you have more access to kind of parse that out. Whether or not you could actually explain that process to anyone coming in, I think it's in the daily experiences that express what you're doing. And you've said before, you're sitting playing video games. And I'm going to do this completely unshaped. I'll do it completely by task. You are walking to school with kid, sometimes kid and pet. You are talking with parents. You are talking with agency individuals. You are talking with principals, like very, very practical steps. You are talking with teachers. Then you can get into the more abstract things. You're doing research. You're professionally reflecting. You're carrying kids' stories until you can figure out how to hand them back to the kid in a useful form. And you have all the tools on the inside that you've developed. You have your spreadsheets. You have all the accoutrements that are sort of the uh, the accredited tools of the education system. You have spreadsheets. You have documents. You have emails. You have communications back and forth. You have phone logs. You have phone mails. Right? You have all these kind of things. I think what the this moment you mentioning this brings it back to that story I shared about and I forget what your reaction to this. I think this was a mixed reaction. Is your team ready for you to leave? And your team can be the team that you have or the team that you don't have yet, but it's the cluster, individual, or group that are going to continue the work that you're doing. I'm fascinated now by this idea for you on your behalf as to what could you start to do right now for that unknown individual who would be stepping into your work? And could those steps actually benefit you in the short run as well? So it's not just about building legacy so someone can take over your job. Are there elements of refinement that you could do right now that would have the dual effect? Being clearer about the work you do and also make it clear about the work you do for you, as in reaffirming your purpose, your why. And would those same steps actually help somebody stepping in? A daily video would help someone step in. That's what I'll end on that. A daily video would, for the exact reasons you said, can be watched quickly, can be consumed in parts, are already where people are. They're where people are prepared to watch YouTube pieces. It would further expand your portfolio of experiences and however you perceive that to be um, complicating, beneficial, questioning for leadership. And it would also reveal to the board a space that I'll go back to the day, if I stood up at a staff meeting and say, where do the kids go? Like, where do they actually go when they go to Access and they're suspended or expelled? Very few teachers back in the day would have been able to say, oh yeah, we know where that place is. It's actually, and actually call out the location for them to actually geolocate where the kid disappeared for 7 days when you're sending out when the kid is no longer with you in the classroom. And I felt like when I was in Access, it was very important to make sure that everybody knew where it was, what it does, how important it is, that it's restorative, that there's other teachers and other humans that are just like you folks working there helping kids. I like this moment you're in. I entirely agree that a little deeper peek would be useful to both you and whomever takes over your position. But I think in the broader sense, I think that it's a fluency that you haven't activated yet. And that alone, to me, means like there's some new training that you can do with it where you're the subject of your own videos. I like that idea. I like it.
As usual, lots of good stuff for me to consider. Lots of good stuff. Let's see what comes next.
What comes next?
It's Thursday. It's Thursday. But for real, it's Saturday. And on this Saturday, there's lots of snow outside.
There is.
There's a
There
lot of
is.
where you and I, well, it's in Newmarket, it's in Waterloo. There's lots of snow outside. I was
I've
telling
just
you.
I've decided it's going to be a family affair. The cleanup will be a family affair. This is going to be dad helping everyone enjoy the dad details.
That's funny. I like that. For you, it's a family thing. For me, it's a selfish Roland thing. I was telling you in the on ramp, my snowblower is gassed up and ready, and after we're done, I'm gonna probably have something to eat again. Really hungry today. Something to eat again, and then head out and blow that snow off my driveway.
Yep. Yep. I think yeah, I don't know if I'm full of I don't know if I'm full of gas, but I know I have enough gas to to get that process rolling. I also know that when I go upstairs, likely um, there'll be others that are not quite ready to engage. But I'm kind of in the headspaces, and maybe you're thinking the same thing. Like I'm thinking I want to kind of get my day going.
Tell me about. So, what's it gonna look like? What's it gonna look like when you? How do you tell the family that part of their morning is going to be assisting with the cleanup? How do you deliver that to them?
How do I interrupt their day?
I guess. Is it an
Of
interruption, or do they know
course,
you well enough that they look outside? They're like, for sure, Dad's
no,
gonna say something about this.
no,
No,
this will be a surprise. Now, unless one of them is listening to me doing the podcast right now.
which they're not.
Sometimes they do because often, I don't think I've ever told you this before. Frequently, my kids do a sleepover on
Yes, yes, the sleepover
right. So often when we get rolling down here chatting, they are like literally
right there.
20 feet just around the corner, still in their sleeping bags. They haven't honored the day yet. They haven't woken up. And sometimes, I go upstairs and Karen's just getting up too. So they all have their necessary slow start, right?
Yes, I get that for sure. Um, so this reminds me, us talking about the podcast reminds me of this business that one day our kids or anybody we know will stumble across this podcast site, and they'll have at least 5.5 years worth of
Wisdom.
conversations to take a look at and reflect on and watch and think about.
Mhm.
Joe Marquez, who's a teacher, well, he works for Q in California, Computer Using Educators. He is a former classroom teacher, and he's been doing some great presentations on generative AI. And I'm a Q member. I'm a registered and paid Q member, so I get free access. Well, it's not free. I paid for it. I get unfettered access to any presentations that Q puts on during
Mhm.
the year, and I've now uh, gone to two of his generative AI presentations, and he starts his talk with some examples of what we think AI is, and then the AI that actually surrounds us right now that we may not even think that it is AI, but it is.
Mhm.
And one of the cool things that he talks about is he always brings up the Superman movies, where Superman has direct access to his father because uh, I guess over time his father's life was captured. Um, it was captured like somehow, and then it's the computer's able to take father's life and then have father pass wisdom on to Superman, based on how father lived his life and how maybe father did things.
Mhm.
So Joe told us about this app called Mind Bank AI, and it's an app. I have not dove into it yet, but it's an app where supposedly it asks me questions. I answer those questions, and it does this often enough that it can then do something with all this information. It can
You also
generate.
don't you also have to give it access to your socials as well?
I don't know. I've not
I
gone.
think that's I've heard about this. I think that's maybe that's the premium version because for it to be um in order to, so the one that I've heard of is that in order for it to be a not a copy, I'm using the wrong word, but like a what is the word? Artifact, copy, it's in that genre. Doppelganger. But basically in order to be a fair representation of you and for your experiences to be parsed out enough that if your bearded face as an icon or as a emoji on the screen were up and one of your kids asked you a question, then um they would have to have access to a lot more information than just that, right?
Yes, this is the thing. I'm I, I I'm not there yet. I'm just
Hmm.
excited that somebody is trying to put something together
Yeah.
that could possibly keep me around after I'm gone. Because I if if somebody told me, "Hey, we have captured the essence of your father. Do you want to talk to your father? Do you want to ask him questions?" I would be in. I'd
Yeah.
be like, "Yeah, yeah." So, it's like the caramel secret. I'd probably have to sell my soul to the devil to get it, but it would
Right.
be very cool if I could have that opportunity again.
Right.
Now, what would make it like the bomb is if there was an actual like hologram image of my father, and
Right.
the way it spoke to me did sound like him and had his mannerisms and stuff.
Agree. Yeah, I remember we touched on this before.
We have I would want that. So anyway, it's so cool, and I don't know if you and I will be around when and if they can master this stuff to make it more holistic and realistic.
Hmm.
But man, I think it's really cool. Now, when I think about the data that has to go into it,
Yeah.
then I
Yeah.
get a little bit scared because it wants your soul, and it can't actually have it, but it wants everything that it can grab from you. Like you said, if it had your socials, and if it needs a lot of data
Hmm.
to be able to spit something out that would reasonably sound or fit with who you are.
Hmm. And I think what's fascinating about this is that there's no the actual body of work, like there's no absolute amount that actually makes the effect uh, more precise, but precision isn't. I think precision isn't the goal. And I don't know how to shake that out at all. Like because even if even if someone had access to my live feed, like if I could create a live feed about how I go about my day, because there are elements of small decisions that I'm making. So if someone were watching me like the Truman Show, because my world is relatively limitless and the options of things that could happen are limitless and the individuals interacting with me are not on script, that that being fed right into a I wanted to say doppelganger, but into an AI system that would be able to sort of like if it could, you do it like a what would happen next kind of like choose your own adventure story. So someone's watching me, right, but they're interacting with the actual AI. So I start to do a um I don't know, I get in my car in the morning and then it pauses the screen and it says, pops up. It's like that Bandersnatch story, that interactive Netflix thing that came up a few years ago. What will happen next? So it's less about choosing the adventure to follow if someone is interacting with the idea. It's does the AI predict, could the AI reasonably predict what I would do in real time next? And because I would still be interacting with different elements in the day, they don't actually know if I'm about for sure if I'm going to turn left or right out of my driveway if I'm facing out. Right. So I think this idea of the AI, it's not about precision, it's about interactivity. It's about, an emotional response. And it's almost like, if someone were to interact with a version of me, I'm still losing that word, a proxy, like a copy of me, they would probably be connect less about it being investigative, as in, why did you have a podcast? Why did you podcast all those years? That wouldn't be the question. It would be more of the, what did you learn from the podcast? So something a little bit more concrete, like, what's a piece of advice, AI Clough, about being a dad? And then the AI goes and grabs all the sort of information. I know it doesn't make that sound, but it's parsing through all the information that has any keyword about dad, parenthood, life, spouse, father, husband, and then putting together then with like Chat GPT understanding of the internet keywords, and puts together a response that is based on the Decoded podcast, Chasing Squirrels podcast, the videos that I've ever put up. Said, here's an answer to that. I like it. I do like it. I do like it. I like where you're sort of like, you're bringing this into the Joe Marquez, right? Marquez. Yeah,
Yeah.
I like this. It's cool.
And Joe is really like, I feel like he's really fallen into all of it. Like
Oh yeah.
oh, big time. And mostly around generative AI, excuse me, and the use of it in education.
Hmm.
Big time. Like I talk to Joe often, and he's always reading about it. He's always getting the latest information that he can get his hands on to try to understand how it operates, how it can be beneficial in education to teachers, students, families, equity issues around it. Um, he's really he's I'm impressed with the focus and the time he's given it, and
Hmm.
listening to him present. Um, so I told him the other day, I've listened to him two full presentations and a third that was like, there were some technical issues, so I didn't stay long for that one because of the
Hmm.
technical issues. But I told him I'm appreciative of the fact that none of those presentations were the same.
Yeah.
He's
We
constantly,
I like that. Yeah.
because
Uh,
I have a pet peeve with that. People who
yeah.
present the exact same thing and it never shifts or grows. It's
Yeah.
static. And so that's my biggest beef with presentations. Probably why I don't do them like others do, because I don't want to say the same thing over and over again. I want to try to mix it up. But
Yeah.
anyway, he's told the Superman story in two of them, but like I don't mind that. But he's found new generative AI sites on the internet that maybe many people don't know about, and then he tells you what their use is and how it operates and what it's used for and how it can be used in education. So um, it's like just his presentations constantly evolving based on what he's learning. And I would like to think that I go back to the YouTube channel, and I'd like to think that um, maybe my experience continues to evolve and change.
Hmm.
And I have hope for that evolution. And I have an example. I work with a kid, and we're kind of stuck right now. We're
Hmm.
stuck. And I visited the student the other day, and the school social worker came with me. And I had no idea this is the other beauty of my something that's grown in me is this understanding that sometimes I'm going into situations and I don't know what's going to happen. I don't care. Like I don't need to know. What I need to
Mhm,
do is have a basic plan of my purpose. What is my purpose? And then I just keep that at the forefront and I let whatever come out of my mouth or whatever it comes from the purpose, but I
mhm,
don't really know how anything's going to play out. So as we're talking with this kid outside on their front porch, I'm paying very close attention to the questions that the social worker's asking and kind of watching them form the beginnings of a relationship. And then by the end of our meeting with the student, I now have a whole new direction that I can move in with the student if they want.
mhm.
And I think one of the ways I got there is from not just saying, "Ah, this kid is I'm gonna write this kid off.
Mhm.
Nothing's gonna change here." I kinda had a little bit of that at the start of all this. Like, "Oh, I've tried this and this, nothing's working." I've shifted, I've evolved to nothing's working right now. With some more time, different direction, things can shift. Don't know which way they're gonna shift. But basically, I'm with the kid until the end of June. That's a fact. As far as like it's a fact. There are layers I can't account for, but I'm in this job until the end of June at the very
Mhm.
least. And that's the only known. Everything else is unknown. And the shifts are happening fast and furious. So with one kid, I see a little bit of progress. With another kid, progress stops and it's back to square one. I remember a time when that would scare the death out of me. Now it's just par for the course.
Well, traditional assessment models don't account for that. Let's like our idea of progression through school is that those are stop gates, right? You move through, you stay there. You go through grade 1, you make it to grade 2, grade 3, grade 4. There's a progression mindset that we accept in our success model and metrics. Progression happens. It's stuts. It's that flow of the universe, right? Like however, you can actually be disconnected or um opposite to that flow or in opposition to that flow. To access it is awesome. I think where we see that the access is different than integration is where you have kids, let's say, um, arriving in grade 9 and not really having um, an understanding the fact that certain courses are not at grade 9 level. The system has progressed them. The system has carried them through, but they are in opposition to the system without even knowing it. They actually don't have the skills that the system says they do, yet they still move on. They get into some hiccups when they hit grade 9, 10, 11, and 12, because then the system shifts and you are no longer in the flow. You don't get automatic access to the flow. And then you start to have kids kind of realizing my flow becomes like stitched together in some cases, some students. They get parts of it. I always think about the tension of having disparate connections to different levels simultaneously of necessary skills, like that feeling about being competent in English, not so competent in math, and average in making relationships happen. Like that, those different kinds of threads that carry a kid through that material of that woven material of a kid's sort of life through high school. Like just imagine all these tension points. And I've worked in similar spaces as you, is that sometimes in order to address those tension points, you actually do have to lose all progress in order to go back and start to work on a thing. And then you're measuring, do we have the time? Do I have the time to sort of go back to sort of grade 3, grade 4 literacy tools to get this kid activated enough to be able to deal with the reality that's right in front of them, which is grade 9 English? If we take this in a social context as in individuals that have been languishing in their education, well, you now have the curriculum and life as the ultimate flow space. Like, and some kids, I've arrived in this space with students many times where the idea of this idea of helping a kid to stay connected with the expected flow of school, the school can't do any more for it because the actual drag on that, or the tether, is their life. There's elements about their life that are quite clearly keeping them from accessing school. So that, you talking about not wanting necessarily to start over, or the sort of the power of starting over. Man, I've found myself in that space so many times, is that we actually do have to let go. We have to let go of our idea that we were even making progress in the first place. And whoa, you do that in a student success meeting, and you can see some people like, well, okay, then what do we do? Because that is a truth sometimes, is that the evidence in front of you is not an indication of progress in the sense that it needs to be. Because the kid's not eating, or the kid is sleeping in a park, or the kid is going to one class a week because that's the day the CYW's at the school, right? Like, this is the cool, because you're the right person, because you're interested in the work, and you're engaged in creating systems. You're basically creating the broader cloth for a kid to exist in education and say, this is school too. And whenever someone can sort of be doing the work that you're doing and remind the system that it is actually has a broader splatter effect than it wants to be. It's not just straight up literacy and numeracy. It's not just straight up attendance. It's not straight up buddy bench and snack program. It's also some one of our teachers walking a kid to school with their dog once a week, because that's how they'll come to school. Got to keep that playing field nice and wide. Got to keep that cloth nice and supportive. So this idea of progress and growth.
Playing field wide, and for me, a lobotomy around the idea that
Personal
yeah,
lobotomy.
personal lobotomy, that the idea that walking the kid and their dog to school is not sustainable for an entire year,
Yeah.
once a day, every week.
Yeah.
It's like I literally have to live in the moment. But which is weird, because it's a paradox. Like, I make plans, and I would say, I don't know what the percentage is, but it's high that the plans I make, they don't play out that way. But I feel like not making any plans would be unprofessional and kind of offside. You know what I mean?
Yep, absolutely I do.
I've learned, I guess, to make plans that are not. There's a framework every day. There's an established framework every day, and then there's adjustment as well.
It makes me what I hear, and this can be maybe new verbiage for you and I. You have enough tools. You're using tools dependent on the day that's presented to you. And you can make a plan, but tools are better. What is the tool for this particular moment? So the plan gives that broad kind of sketch based on an understanding of everything you've done in the past, but recognizes that the past is always just behind the moment that you're in. So in theory, whatever plan you make only informative up to the actual moment that you're in. It doesn't give you any sense that the next thing that will happen will.
Can I
Especially when dealing with humans. For me, when dealing with humans. So then it becomes, when your plan doesn't fall, when your plan is not working, do you make another plan, or do you use a tool? You're more likely to use a tool in that moment, like when that plan isn't working. And I would argue that making another plan is not a tool. But I won't argue it now. I gotta bust out soon, but you tell me. Go.
I tell you what,
I don't
about
know. I felt like you wanted to jump in on that one.
um, I need an example. I'd like an example. Can you give me an example?
If you made it, you made so
Can I give you an example? And then you tell me,
yeah, sure.
respond with the tool, I
Yeah,
guess?
give me the example.
I show up at a school to meet with a student and they're
Yep,
not there,
yep,
but nobody emailed me to tell me that they're not there.
yep.
What do
So
I
what's the
do?
tool? What's the tool?
That's what I'm asking you.
Oh,
Uh,
so the tool then is several. Communicate. Bang on. Communicate. Reach out to parent, reach out to kid, reach out to admin. Tool. In that moment, expecting to say, okay, well, I'm going to try and make an appointment to meet up with the kid next week is adjusting the plan. The plan doesn't exist at that point. Only the tool does.
Okay.
So that right? So that's how I would sort of break it just before. I'm not saying a new plan isn't in the works. I like the idea that I like the idea that that you're actually actively using it because the tool speaks to the moment that you're in. I'll tie it back to Stutz. That's the whole thing about Stutz. I'm going to give you a tool right now that you're going to use right now to relieve the pressure in the moment that you're in. So why not? Let's look at that from an EDU perspective. What that could also mean is that you're not the person to make the plan. You're the person to implement the tool. I think back to how often this was really confusing when I was running restaurants because I was the one that had to make the plan and I was the one having to make the tool, which meant I didn't have the perspective to make the right plan because someone has to on the outside observe your usage of the tool. Sure, we can self-assess until we're, confused, but that's technically what that can happen quite often. Why isn't this tool working? Well, that's not a question that you only ask yourself. Your next tool would be ask the kid directly, ask your principal directly, ask the system directly, ask a critical friend directly, right? So, in order to sharpen the tool, there has to be an outward expression of evidence, like something that sort of shows what you did. Walk me through your process, is the jargon from your SO and your principal. There's some wisdom in that. I think there's some wisdom in that. And the fact of it is, I'll go back to that other example I shared with you on the polo when I had a horrible lunch service one day back in the day with the restaurants. And one of the owners came up to me and said, "What happened? What happened?" And I said, "I don't know." And I told you, I was told directly that they were considering demoting or firing me that day because it was my job to have tools and evidence to express as to why a thing I had to produce the what. That's the great thing about the tools. I think the tools get you close to the very clear what, when, where, right? And when I try to exist in the why and how, my boss is like, "You're messed up. You have to be able to produce the evidence as to why that happened. You don't get to ask me why back." It's not rhetorical. The tools get you away from the rhetorical. The tools also say this tool um, this tool wasn't used to its fullest potential, so I'm going to use the tool again because often these tools, as in take time, if like tools for you, like tools for the individual, that's one layer of efficacy. But when you're using tools as a teacher and you're looking to influence, so you're looking to lead, that's a different timeline, right? That's a totally it runs on a different timeline than your planned expectations. My CYW yesterday said to we have a CYW trainee with us, a student. The trainee was talking about how amazing a conversation was observing a conversation that so that the student was observing, I'll say the master. The student was observing the master. The student said to the master, "That was a really good conversation. It looked like you made progress." The master said, "That's been a year of little steps." I'm making it sound more poetic than it is because I do that, but that was the response. And the student said, "Yeah, I figured." And the master said, "No, stay there. Don't figure it because you actually haven't figured anything. What you now have to figure out is what would you do if it took you a full school year to build a relationship? That's the window that I'm giving you right now. And then the student's like, well, it would depend on the kid. Yep. But I'm giving you a heads up. What is it for you to reflect on yourself? What tools do you need to remain in a year-long development, like professional development sort of like schema of getting to know a kid? Like, what could that look like? Even if it means, would you say to me right now, well, my tool right now is that I would set up, a weekly meeting. Okay, cool. Start with that. Test drive it, right? This also comes on the heels. So we've just moved past the halfway mark with the student with us. So both myself and the master said, it would be good for you to pick one thing to try and make happen. So basically, a challenge of practice. Pick one thing. One thing. Make a decision that you want to try and test drive, instigate, influence, and then observe what happens when you do. But put yourself at the center of a sequence of events, or at the beginning of a sequence of events, and try to make it happen. It could be an inquiry question. It could be something that you don't understand that we're doing. It could be involving yourself in an activity in the school, but drive your own boat. You've already proven you can do the job. Any other assessment that we have at this point would only be a reiteration of the evaluation we just did. Don't do that to yourself. Take the last 5 weeks that they have and actually try and create something. Suffer. Take some risk.
2 thumbs up. Before we go, I will
Mhm.
tell you what I did as I was walking out of the building. I emailed the parent, the principal, the social worker. I said, "Hey, what's going on? I understand things happen, but next time, if you know you're not coming, can you please email me and let me know?"
Mhm.
The response was, "I'm really sorry. Of course we can do that." And then I got in my car and I went to the closest school where I have a student that I wasn't going to check in on, but then did. That's what I did. Do you want to show us what you drew today before we head out? Oh, somebody's juggling? Is that what that is? Two hands and a ball up in a ball, three balls in the air?
Mhm.
Is that right?
Yep.
Cool.
Cool, man.
Thanks for your time today, Clough.
You too, bud. You too. Gotta go check on that damn cat.
Yeah, this was season 6, episode 23, number 241 of the Decoded podcast. Chris is going to go check on his cat, and I'm going to go eat again. Peace, y'all.
That's awesome.